Hi Not Board Gamers and welcome back to Not Board Gaming. I'm your host, I'm Mark. Now in today's video we're going to be taking a look at Red Rising, the latest game from Stonemaier Games and Jamie Stegmaier. Now this is going to be a slightly different format because it's not going to be a straightforward review. I want to discuss kind of theme and why it's important and how that affects Red Rising, as well as some other things as well. You know, a couple of things to say kind of off the bat is, first of all, this is a review copy that was sent to me by the guys at Stonemaier Games, and kudos to them because, you know, my review last year of Pendulum was less than kind. In fact, it was kind of the worst solo experience I had last year. And my review of Tapestry it wasn't that great as well, but Stonemaier do like getting a wealth of reviews for their games, good or bad, so they sent me a copy of the collector's edition of Red Rising. The second thing is I have absolutely no experience with the books whatsoever. I haven't read the books, I won't read the books. There are far many more books that will probably take up my time before I even think about getting around to Red Rising. So I want to kind of discuss the impact that that's had on my enjoyment of the game as well. So as I say, not a straightforward review, more of a discussion about theme and about a few other things. I will obviously give my thoughts on the solo game, and yeah, I'd be really interested to hear your comments down below. So once you watch the video, whether you agree or not, that's absolutely fine. But yeah, be interested to have some form of discussion on this. So let's discuss Red Rising. So if you've watched my videos before, you'll know that generally there's lots of different cuts from different angles as I explore various facets of the game. It's not going to happen in this video because I wanted to be kind of more of a direct-to-camera discussion and open up some discussion points with you guys as well. So what is Red Rising? Well, Red Rising is a card-based game. It's a kind of hand management combo building game as you aim to maximise the cards in your hand and on the board by using various kind of deploy abilities and things that will get you end game points to get the maximum number of points at the end of the game. Now it's a multiplayer game, so you can play it with a number of players, but there is an included Ultima in the deck, in the package as well, which allows you to play it solo. And you know what? I've had a decent time playing it solo. It's not a bad game in terms of the mechanics of the game, where you start with a deck of 5 cards, and you use the various abilities on the cards themselves. So we just look at the card at the top here. What you got is the end game points of the card. At the middle here is your deploy abilities. So this middle banner here, when you put the card down, allows you to do something else. You generally put a card down and pick a card up. And then at the end, you have some end game abilities and maybe there's some end game scoring. And look at this sumptuous artwork. And I think that's a great thing on here. You can see that this is a passion project for Jamie and the guys at Stonemaier. And I think the artwork is absolutely sumptuous on there. There's some real character in there. Look at the artwork alone makes me want to know more about these characters. But a little bit more on that as we go through it. So there are various resources, well not various resources, there are resources in the game. We have a number of helium tokens here, which you will collect throughout the game. And these are kept in this wonderful looking kind of fox head container. There's a fleet track at the top of the board, but your little spaceship will kind of zoom up the fleet track and try and get you maximum points there. And there's also the Institute as well, where you're going to place some of your cubes, and I've got the collector's edition, so some metal cubes there, to try and get the maximum amount of influence at the Institute. Those things, the fleet track, the helium, and the Institute, as well as being scoring kind of parts for the game, they're also kind of the timer for the game as well. If you hit certain parameters on each of those, maybe 2 or 3 of those, depending on how the game is going, then that will trigger the end game conditions, where you'll start this slightly convoluted process of tallying up your score. There is a not a first play marker, there is a first play marker. There is this marker as well, which is kind of like, gives you, when you get the sovereign token, which is this, it gives you some additional powers depending on which faction you've chosen. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 factions that you can choose from as well there, or you can randomly deal them out to yourself. So in reality, setup is fairly basic. There's some cards you put on the board you put out, some cards you put out. There's quite a lot of cards, 100 odd cards there. You lace them out on the board, you deal yourself some cards, you deal the Ultima a couple of cards, and you give the Ultima his deck, and that's it. And, you know, then you're going to play this game where you're putting cards down, taking cards up, using this really simple to use and quite effective Ultima to control the Ultima or the AI kind of getting there, trying to racking up their points, putting stuff in the Institute, moving up the fleet track or gaining helium, etc. All of these things and go towards end game conditions. It's a great little puzzle. It takes no time to set up. You can play the game in round about 20, 25, 30 minutes, something like that as a solo player, and have a pretty decent time playing it as well. There's some nice puzzle that goes on there. You've got this sumptuous artwork as well. It's all very, very good, but what is Red Rising? That's where the game leaves you in a bit of a lurch, you see. And by that, what do I mean? Well, first of all, let's look at the rule books, okay? So, Stonemaier being Stonemaier, they've managed to condense the rule book down into kind of 6-7 pages long, and that's absolutely great. And then there's a separate, easy to follow, as you would expect, Automa or AI rule book. So this is done by the Automa factory, of course, and it's called the Tull Automa, and that is your Automa opponent. So all very straightforward to do. And I'd say that the game is based on Pierce Brown's novels, Red Rising, which are really, really, really popular, about a dystopian future. I believe, I'd done no research on Red Rising before I actually got the game, but I believe that's what it is, and I was hoping that the game would allow me to have some kind of insight into the world of Red Rising. You've got a lot of time's been expended on this fantastic artwork, on this great looking kind of characters that you have on there. Look at the Razor designer just there. Looks great. That's an orange faction. I'll come on to, or an orange cast, and I'll come on to that in a little bit. But in reality, unfortunately, what I consider a pretty big misstep by Stonemaier Games, there is no background on the world of Red Rising. And when I say no background, well, it's almost no background. See, these kind of 3 lines of text here that you can see on the rulebook here. I'm going to read them out to you. If you've never read Red Rising and you have not been invested in this world, this is all it's going to tell you about the world of Red Rising. And I think we'll discuss this once I've read this to you. So, enter the futuristic universe of Red Rising, based on the book series by Pierce Brown, featuring a dystopian society divided into 14 castes. You represent a house attempting to rise to power as you piece together an assortment of followers. Will you break the chains of the society or embrace the dominance of the golds? What does that tell you? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I can hear them now. I can hear you guys now. The people that love the Red Rising book franchise. The people that have started reading the Red Rising book franchise since Jamie announced the game. Why would you buy a game based on something that you don't have any knowledge of? Why would you buy a game on an IP you have no knowledge of? This is a question that was asked on Facebook to me the other day when I mentioned the fact that, some of my concerns on the game, and it is a fair point. Why would I buy a game that I based on an IP I have no foreknowledge of? As I say, this is a review copy, so I am slightly, coming at this from a slightly different angle, but let's look at why people might buy Red Rising. I mean, first of all, if you like the books, if you're invested in the books already, then of course you're going to potentially want the game. Why would you want the game? Well, first of all, if you're a board gamer and Stonemaier have a certain seal of quality, then it's going to appeal to you. Of course it is. You're a fan of the books. Some of this artwork will start to make sense to you. Some of these characters on this artwork will start to make sense to you. The reason that the helium is kept in a fox head container will start to make sense to you. To me, it makes no sense whatsoever. So yeah, if you're invested in the books, then absolutely this is potentially going to speak to you. Also, if you're a Stonemaier fan, maybe this has caused you to then go out and have a look at the books. Maybe you haven't heard of them before, or you were aware of them in your periphery. And, Stonemaier have a decent influence over the board gaming community. So maybe Stonemaier have kind of caused you, prompted you to go and look further into the Red Rising universe, which is fantastic. If more people are picking books up, fantastic. If this has caused more people to pick books up, absolutely great. And therefore the game will start to make sense to you as you go through. But if we look at, say, a particular marketing model, and I'm not saying this is Stonemaier's model in terms of what they want from their games. If you imagine almost a Venn diagram, over here we have board gamers, over here we have Red Rising fans, and then the kind of bit in the middle is a relatively small market. So for this to absolutely work, what should happen is it should appeal to Red Rising fans, and it should appeal to board gamers, and not just to board gamers who are going to be Red Rising fans. And for that to happen, there needs to be more lore involved or more to buy you into the game. And this is a key concern of the game for me, is that because all I get as a non-Red Rising fan, as somebody that hasn't read the books and won't read the books, all I get is 3 lines of text to buy me into the world. What that means is the game becomes extremely abstracted, like hugely abstracted. I do not care about this wonderful artwork on these cards. I do not care. When I have the cards in my hand, I'm looking at the colour of the card, I'm looking at the points at the top, what my deploy action is, and what this is at the bottom. And even the colour of the card sometimes I don't really care that much about. And say there are 14 casts and therefore a number of different colours in here. Yeah, I should care about them. I should understand what Tactus does, or what the Banker is, or the Jackal, who's a gold card, or Bone Riders, or the Janitor. I should care about that. I'm not. I am so abstracted from this entire experience as somebody who is not familiar with the IP that it makes it difficult for me to enjoy the game. There are some other things as well. So, as I mentioned, these helium counters, which are great. They're nice red kind of jewelry looking things. They're kept in this fox head container. First of all, helium. Why is it important? I have absolutely no idea why I'm collecting helium tokens, other than them being a kind of scoring mechanism and an endgame mechanism for the game itself. I have absolutely no idea. Makes no sense to me at all, because there is nothing in the book or a separate docket which tells me something about the lore. Now, with the best will in the world, you could say, well, go and research it, and I could, but I shouldn't have to, basically. If you're looking to sell a game to people who aren't fans of the IP or the franchise, then at least try and educate them. And you know, Stonemaier, they create some great rule books. They put a lot of effort in their rule books, but give me some background to explain what helium is and why it's kept in a fox head container. Let's talk about the kind of fleet track as well. So I've got these wonderful like metal spaceships which go up the fleet track. If I pull cards off Jupiter, or take a card off Jupiter, I get to move up the fleet track, and that's fantastic. That gets me more victory points. What is the fleet track? Why do I have a spaceship? I don't have any idea whatsoever. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. All I'm doing is, if I take a card off there, I'm moving my spaceship up a fleet track. What is the fleet? What do they do? Why am I doing that? How does that tie in to the helium tokens in the fox head container? It doesn't make any sense to me. The same goes for the Institute, where I will place my little marker cubes again as a scoring mechanism, and also an end game timer mechanism as well. What is the Institute? Why am I doing that? The rule book does not tell me. All it tells me in the rule book is that if I take a card off the Institute, I get the kind of location bonus. After gain a card from one of the 4 locations during the lead action or the scout action. There's 2 actions you can take, lead or scout. Doesn't really matter. If I take a card off Jupiter, I advance on the fleet track. If I take a card off Mars, I gain a helium token. If I take a card from Luna, I get the sovereign token. At least I get why I get that. It gives me some additional powers. I don't know what it is or why it's called a sovereign token. And if I take one off the Institute, I can place one of my influence tokens on the Institute. And unfortunately, it really is as abstracted as that. Look, I played it solo, and as I say, I think the Ultima that comes with it from the Ultima factory is nice and easy to use. It maintains a flow in the game. There's an adaptive scoring ability on there as well, so you can make it more difficult or harder for yourself, depending on kind of what game you want to have. And that's great. I think that really works very, very well. But everything is so abstracted. All I'm doing when I play the game is trying to get the most points. I'm not bought into anything on here at all. It just detracts away from any enjoyment as a non-Red Rising fan that you may have about this game. It feels too abstracted, and that is a real concern. Would it really have taken that much more to provide an element of depth, an element of background, an element of focus and setting within the book itself, outside of 3 lines, to give me a little bit of reason about what helium tokens are, why I'm collecting helium tokens, why they're important to me? And unfortunately, it doesn't do that. So you've got these 3 tracks: helium, fleet, Institute, and for people who aren't familiar with the IP, they will mean absolutely nothing to you. Now, as you can see, I get quite heated about this, and I'm a little bit passionate about it, because I've had a good time playing Red Rising solo. I really have had a good time playing Red Rising solo, but that experience is massively marred by the fact that I don't know why I'm playing Red Rising solo. I don't know what the aim is other than to get the most victory points. There's no story there, there's no background, it's just so abstracted. For a bit of balance, I played a two-player game with my wife. She's not a massive board gamer. She likes Dune Imperium. She likes Cthulhu: Death May Die. We recently played Camp Grizzly, which she absolutely loved. She's not a massive board gamer, and she has no knowledge of Red Rising whatsoever. And we played through a game of Red Rising, and she beat me. And she beat me by literally holding on to the first 5 cards that were in her hand, which massively just kind of gave us some huge end game points, and she just churned a card and got it back and churned a card and got it back throughout the entire game. Her reaction at the end of the game, as somebody who's not bought into, or doesn't know anything about Red Rising at all, was she had no idea why she was doing anything that she was doing. Made no sense to her whatsoever. And rather kind of cuttingly, she said that she never wants to play the game again. She had no enjoyment in the game whatsoever. It just became a game of churn. There was no game there for her. And I think that's where we get back to the crux of this discussion, is there are certain games, you think of some Euro games, and even though they are abstracted from theme, a good Euro game will try to give you a reason as to why you're doing what you're doing, be that, I don't know, A Feast for Odin, or be that Endless Winter, which I recently played, which is, kind of holds something in line with this, because of course there is some card management on there. Same with Dune Imperium. It's a card hand management game, but you've bought into the theme of that. Again, I've never read Dune. My wife has never read Dune. She loved Dune Imperium because she thought it was a game that made perfect sense. So when you get a game like this, which is not an Ameritrash game or a dungeon crawler, which is all about theme, this is a card game. When you get a game like this, then I would like some more information as to why I'm doing what I'm doing. And it's not just me, as I say, there's my wife as well. Now, again, I can hear you all screaming at me, go and read the books. Go and do some research, and that is great advice. I won't read the books because it's not really my style of literature, and I could do some research, but quite frankly, I want to be given that as part of the game. I want Stonemaier to provide me with a reason as to why why I'm collecting helium tokens, or what the fleet track is, or what the institute is, and it's not there. I want them to give me some background on the 14 casts. Why are they so different? Give me these 6 houses: Mars, Minerva, Diana, Apollo, Jupiter, and Ceres. What are the houses? Why am I fighting for the houses? If you look at Dune Imperium, you get the various houses in Dune Imperium, and you got some, you got a particular figurehead for that, be that the Atreides or be that the Baron, and you know a little bit more about them there. But here, I get nothing at all. There is nothing that ties me into the game, and it's a real shame, as I say, because all this makes it sound like I don't like the game. And it's okay. It's a decent enough solo puzzle, But that abstraction of the theme, or the complete lacking of the theme for somebody who's not aware of Red Rising, and bear in mind that's going to be a large part of the audience of people that buy this game, it could be a real off-put for them. There are some other things as well, so let's talk about kind of whether this game should exist in this format. So this kind of interests me about Red Rising. You look at it, and initially you look at the components, and I know it's say the collector's edition, but the standard edition is pretty good as well. And you get a nice board with some great artwork on there. You get all the cards with all the artwork. You get the helium tokens, the little rockets, the cubes. You get a dice. You get a sovereign token. You get a scoring pad. And although the scoring is kind of convoluted, it still works. There's a lot there. Most of it is utterly extraneous, and I know you can say that about a lot of games. Some of the stuff that you get with it and some of the components are just padding to give you more content for your money. But when you look at the size of the box, it's kind of a standard size box, and then you open the box, you strip the board away, and then everything else is spaced out within this within the insert in there, and there's a lot of dead space in there, because I think that kind of points at what this game is. Maybe it's something to think about in the future, because there is a big stack of cards, some 120 cards or whatever it is. There we go. Which is great. As a solo player, you're never going to churn through the deck. When you multiplayer, you stand more chance of churning through the deck there. But there's a big old stack of cards. If this game purely came with that stack of cards, one dice, and a dry white pad that acted as a kind of scoring marker and kind of tracking marker throughout the game, that would be fantastic. That would work exceptionally well. You could even kind of trim the cards down and get them to a travel-sized game. Wouldn't that be great? A travel-sized Stonemaier game. What you've got here is stuff that you don't necessarily need. You don't need the board. It's utterly meaningless because you can just lay 4 columns of cards out with header cards at the top and keep track of the score, the fleet track or the institute on a separate piece of paper. You don't need helium tokens. You don't need helium jewels at all. You certainly don't need a fox head counter. Absolutely irrelevant. You could keep track of that on a separate pad. You don't need cubes. You don't need the fleet track because you can keep track of those on a separate pack. And I think that then comes down to the crux of this is depends on how you want to play the game. Table presence on it is nice. Everything looks fantastic. And if you enjoy a game with great table presence, then you're going to be paying for that privilege. Then that's absolutely fine. Now, bear in mind the base game, it's not expensive. I think it's around about £30 for the base game. So it's not a massive investment. And of course, within that, there will be licensing fees, etc., that will have to be paid. The collector's edition is, I think it's going to retail for around about £50. It's it's another 20%, and that's because you're getting some metal components. And so at £30, is the base game as it stands worth it? Well, given what you probably get for it, in the standard edition, I'd say yeah, £30 is not an unreasonable amount to pay for a board game. Should you upgrade and get the collector's edition? I would say no. Yeah, because certainly as a solo player, it offers you nothing. There are different, obviously there are 5 different factions you can play as. And therefore you get 5 different coloured cubes and 5 different coloured spaceships. You get some metal stuff. So yeah, you get this stuff, but as a solo player, you're only going to use 2 of those factions at any one time, 2 of these cubes at any one time. So I would say, depending on what you want from the game, if you're looking for a great table presence, and you're potentially going to play the game with other people, then yeah, the kind of base game could be worth it. But could it be done in a different format? And that's why I think they potentially could have had an opportunity here to do this as I say, just as a deck of cards. Maybe even have it as an expandable card deck, and kind of buying card packs and doing expansions that way. And then just a simple kind of dry erase sheet with a marker pen, which would keep track of everything else. Everything else could then go. You could just have the cards in a dry erase sheet. Maybe you could even control the Automa via an app. Who knows? Or if you like cards, you can have cards. There's so much more that could have been done with this game to strip it down and make it an enjoyable experience. Now, had they done that, maybe they could have spent some more time on kind of giving us some lore and giving people a bit more buy-in on what the game is about and why we're interested in moving up the fleet track or moving the institute. But it didn't. Jamie's model was, to release a box game, and that's what they've done. It's just a box game with a lot of space and a lot of air in the box, and that's a shame. Because, as I keep going back to this artwork, I think the artwork is fantastic. I think you can see it's a passion project for Jamie and for Stonemaier. You can see that there's a lot of thought gone behind each individual character that's gone in there. And Jamie, without knowing the franchise, has obviously tried to stay very true to the franchise. And I think it comes across as a very personal love letter to the Red Rising books. But that's potentially the issue. It's personal to Jamie and potentially, a smaller group of people who are board gamers who love the Red Rising books. For the rest of us, who maybe haven't read them or have a passing interest in them, it just drags it drags a large portion of the enjoyment out of playing the game. So, as a solo player then, is it worth it? Going back to this question, as a solo player, is it worth getting the standard edition of Red Rising? And that's a really interesting point. So I do say that potentially if you want to play the game with other people, then yeah, absolutely. Maybe go out and spend your 30 quid and get the standard edition of Red Rising. If you're going to play it with other people, if you're only going to play the game solo, is it worth 30 quid for you? And if you're not bought into the theme, if you don't know anything about Red Rising, Probably not, and there's an alternative, and I think you should really go and explore the alternative. And that alternative is the fact that you can play the solo game, I believe, for free on Tabletopia. If you want to play multiplayer, then you have to pay for it, but I believe you can play the solo game for free on Tabletopia, and I would heartily recommend that as a solo gamer without any knowledge of the Red Rising universe, that you go out there and you try the solo game on Tabletopia. Now, like most people, I much prefer a physical copy of the game to playing on my laptop. Absolutely 100%. But in this case, I would really recommend, as a solo player that doesn't know anything about the Red Rising world and the books, etc., please hold back on that purchase. Do not go and buy the game of Red Rising, the physical game of Red Rising. As good as a kind of little hand management kind of combo building game as it is, as good and as simple as the Ultimate is, if you're not invested in the world, it's going to come across as a really abstracted and cold experience. So go onto Tabletopia, get your laptop, get your Mac or whatever, whatever you use, iPad, whatever, go onto Tabletopia, try the solo experience on Tabletopia. Play about a dozen games, and trust me, it won't take you that long. I played maybe 15 games of this since I've had it. A little bit swingy at times, depending on which house you choose and what happens there. It's a little bit swingy, but it takes no time at all. So as I say, I played about 15 games of this so far. I've mostly enjoyed what I've played. Would I go out and buy the game for a purely solo experience? No, because as I mentioned, there's just not enough here to keep me interested in there's no theme here if you're not bought into the Red Rising kind of universe. So please, as a solo player, just hold on to that money. Go onto Tabletopia, and I would not normally recommend this, but go onto Tabletopia, play the game about a dozen times. You rattle through that in play over 3 or 4 days a dozen times. It's not an issue at all. If you still like the game at that point, then absolutely go out and buy the standard edition. But as a solo player, you may not want to go and buy the collector's edition, not unless the thought of having kind of a number of metal blocks and spaceship that you're never going to use in a big spacious box appeals to you. So yeah, it's a weird one. And I want to really tie this back to what I kind of started the video talking about and why theme is important. For me, theme is important. I can forgive it if the game is portrayed as an abstracted game, if it's not based necessarily on an IP. I can forgive that. There are plenty of abstracted games out there. But this, which has made a big splash about tying into Pierce Brown's books, about the fact it's Jamie's favourite book series, real opportunity here to bring people on that journey, to absolutely bring people who aren't familiar with Red Rising into the world of Red Rising and understand why all this gorgeous, wonderful artwork makes sense, what it means. As it stands, it's a massive missed opportunity. Theme is important sometimes, and certainly in a game like this, which is based off an IP, you better get that theme right. As I say, for all of you that have read the books, that love the books, fantastic. You will understand everything about this game. You are a smaller part of the wider audience, and for those that you are using this as a kind of springboard to go and learn the books, that's also a great thing, because more people reading books. Get off your devices, stop watching me, and go and read books. Absolutely fantastic. But for the rest of us, and that's going to be the large majority of the board gaming market, and these are people that will buy a Stonemaier game as an insta-buy because it's a Stonemaier game, then yeah, that theme needed to be there. It needed to link in every element of this gameplay, and unfortunately Red Rising doesn't just sidestep that, doesn't just narrowly miss that. What it does is just avoid it completely. It's just gone off in a direction which says, I'm playing purely to the fans here, anybody else can play catch up. And if that was the model, perfect, great. As a casual board gamer, as a casual board game buyer, as somebody that would buy games because, of various reasons and not necessarily the IP itself, then you needed to take me on that journey, and Red Rising, yeah, you failed on that score for me, which is a shame. As I say, we get back to the crux. It's a decent solo game. It's overproduced. There's too much stuff in there. There's too much space in the box. There is no lore. There's no buying into the theme, and that's a shame, because as a hand management combo building game, it's a pretty decent game. It's easy to learn. You could teach it to your kids. It's not necessarily an adult game by any stretch of the imagination. It's a good family game. It'd be a great game to get out, on a Sunday afternoon on the garden when the sun's shining. If you just want to play it on your own, if you can get over that lack of theme, you're going to have kind of a 30-minute great experience setting up, playing the game, putting it away. 40-minute experience. It's going to be great if you can get past the fact that unless you know about Red Rising, it's not going to make any sense to you. And there we go, guys, a slightly different Not Board Gaming episode today, but I think it kind of warranted it, and I kind of want to do more of these discussion pieces in the future as well. Red Rising was kind of the first on the table there for me to do this on, and I'd be really interested in hearing your thoughts on this, whether you agree with me, whether you disagree with me, etc. All I'll ask is, please keep it civil. Yeah, I'm not kind of berating anybody here too much. I have some issues with the game and with how the game is kind of portrayed and how it's going out to the market and the lack of theme. But yeah, please keep it civil. Remember that we're all in this to have fun, and some people will get a tremendous amount of fun out of Red Rising. For other people, I just want to kind of make sure that you're aware of the options that are available to you, as in Tabletopia, and just aware of its potential shortcomings if you've not been invested in the book. So yes, thank you very much for joining me on this discussion today. Please do comment in the link below, in the comments below. I'd be really interested to find out your thoughts on that. So thank you very much for joining me today. This is Not Board Gaming. My name's Mark. Remember, you can always like and subscribe to the channel. Check out our other videos. And one final thought. If you can't find anybody else to play with, there's nothing wrong with playing with yourselves. Until next time, bye-bye.